the government has announced that around 500 male migrants are to be housed on a barge off the Dorset coast. The three-storey barge, called the Bibby Stockholm, will be moored in Portland Port near Weymouth for at least 18 months as migrants wait for their asylum claims to be processed. Now, the barge will have around-the-clock security, and the asylum seekers will not be detained and will be free to go into Portland. Local councillors and charities have opposed the idea, saying that it would be entirely inadequate to house vulnerable people, denying them of their dignity, support and the respect that they deserve. But bearing in mind that they are not being detained and they are free to explore the local area, which you're seeing on your screens right now, I'm not too sure what all the fuss is about. Looks very pleasant, if you ask me. Look, there are paddle boards and everything. Apparently there's snooker tables, there's a gym. Well, look, to unpick all of this, I am joined by my distinguished panel. I've got Christian Calgie of the Daily Express and GB News' very own Nigel Nelson. Christian, I have been laughing a lot at MPs who've been asked, would you live on this barge? Would you live on this barge? And they've gone, well, I think I would. Just say no, and the reason why it's a no is because it's supposed to be a deterrent.
Well, exactly. Although I went to university in Hull, so I think it looks better than my halls of residence did for 3 years. You're absolutely right. It's designed to be a deterrent. It's not working. We had I think we had about 80% the full capacity of the barge arrive yesterday, so that's now full. My belief is, firstly, it is a deterrent compared to the hotels.
Yeah.
I also think there's a point that a lot of people aren't making, which is, yes, the barge costs money, and yes, the RAF bases cost money, but housing migrants in hotels not only costs money filling up the hotels, but you don't have visitors going to those hotels and spending money in the local area, so there's almost it's a compounded cost, which it won't happen with the barge.
Nigel, do local residents have a right to say these people should not be allowed off the ship?
They've certainly got a right to say it, but it will go nowhere. They're not prisoners. They're not convicted of any crime. These people are asylum seekers, and they're entitled to come and go more or less as they please. Now, whether this is a deterrent or not, at the moment, the Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick, he's saying, oh, it's very basic, this will deter people from crossing the Channel. The whole immigration policy is completely contradictory. We've got Suella Braverman going to Rwanda and telling us the accommodation there is so wonderful that she'd like to incorporate the decor in her own home.
Yes,
now, on the basis of that, where's the deterrent there? Why not get a boat across to Dover, get a free flight over to Rwanda if it's so good?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we were just watching on the screen there some pictures of the gym. It's got a rowing machine. There'll be a joke in there somewhere. I will not make it. And but look, I mean, supposedly, if this isn't now a deterrent at all, which, I mean, if anything, if today's arrivals are anything to go by, then it isn't. What else can the government do short of just building a massive wall in the Channel?
Well, this is the problem that no one seems to confront, is as easy as it is to point the finger at our government and say what you're doing isn't working. Things have fundamentally changed globally over the last couple of years. Countries across Europe and the developed West are struggling with this problem, Europe especially. And yes, they can point at Australia and say these sort of stop-the-boat deterrents did work. Australia is quite different to Britain. I mean, it's much further away from anywhere else, for one thing.
Yeah.
So I just think we need to start questioning, are any policies actually going to stop the hundreds of thousands that are being displaced increasingly from war and climate?
Which they could. I mean, look, there are three things we can do. The first thing is we reduce the waiting list for asylum applications so we can process them more quickly.
Does that not mean just waving more through then?
No, not at all. It just means hiring more staff to actually process them. The second thing is to renegotiate our returns with the EU that we lost because of Brexit. There's not an attack on Brexit, it was just a consequence of it.
I mean, people obviously say that wasn't particularly working to begin with.
Well, but we then renegotiate a new deal. We're out of Europe. We can do a new deal. The biggest thing, the most important thing, is to change the asylum system so these people do not have to claim asylum once they're physically in Britain. They've got to be able to do it elsewhere, because that's the draw that's taken them to Calais and bringing them across the Channel.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, do you think that the human rights of the people of Dorset, Portland in particular, are actually being treated as second rate? So the human rights of people, bear in mind, it's young single men OK, so we know that about them, all of them, and they will be allowed to roam free in the area. Is that a serious detriment to the human rights of the people who are already living in that area?
Well, it's very interesting. I think we can't take all of the proposed sort of new settlements, all the RAF bases, former prisons, barges, together, because it's very different. If one is near a major conurbation, that is going to support the residents of those hotels and barges and RAF bases better than if the only local place for miles is a tiny 200-person village full of pensioners and one pub and one corner shop. What I find very interesting is that we seem to have a government that rolls over to protesters when it comes to housing, wind farms, solar farms, reservoirs, but on this occasion, they've completely railroaded the process through.
They go somewhere.
Now this is the other point of it, isn't it? Because they do have to go somewhere, and even if it's got a sniff of being a deterrent, at some point you have to have something that looks a bit like a barge or a bit like a prison or an RAF base or whatever, somewhere in the country. In your opinion, do the people of Dorset have to suck it up?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is, because they have to go somewhere, everywhere you put migrants, people object to it. I know, for instance, down in Eastbourne, they've got 5 hotels along the seafront. The locals object to that, understandably.
You just quickly on that, very quickly on that, you've said there that wherever you put these bases, then people would disagree with it.
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry, does that not mean that there would be mass support for turning the boats back, then?
Well, how do you turn the boats back?
Tow them back.
How do you turn them back? How do you physically turn a little dinghy back, with a destroyer or something like that, and sink them? You can't do that. Secondly, we're turning them back to France. They're not France's problem. These people have come through France and a number of other countries to get to Britain.